This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Coming to you from our stunning studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton. It's Jespersen and Hicks on another rousing summer episode of Real Talk. Good morning, John. You know, this is the time of year where a lot of people hit the road. They head out camping. They seek Wi-Fi free zones in the backcountry, on lake shores and the like. But still, this audience of engaged, informed Real Talkers continues to convene live weekday mornings at 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern, or later on demand. And as you start what we call our Real Talk pre-roll, people that listen to our podcast or check out our episode, little weed joke there for you, but people that check out the YouTube episodes, like, 24 hours after they go up, they won't see the pre-roll. It's, the 5 to 10 minutes before our live stream starts, where basically the shorts play, so people get 45 to 90 second synopses of some of our best interviews. And I see as this pre-roll has been going, our live chatters, of course, they're powered by Park Power, are already gathering. They're saying hello to each other, many of them by name.
Hello.
I want to give Tony credit first out of the gates today with her happy hump day wish to everybody. But then everybody goes on and they start by name issuing good mornings and welcomes, I think, to their fellow chatters. And the reason I bring this up, and believe it or not, friends, I did not spend hours on this opening address, on this script. I have simply been struck in the 45 to 60 seconds before we started talking by these friendships that have developed, by these relationships that happen when we gather in community. And to be quite honest with you, as they say in a children's book that I quite enjoy reading to my boys, it really fills our bucket to see this kind of stuff happening. Plus, everybody shares their favorite political rumors. Of course, this happens 24 hours a day in our Real Talk community chat. That's on Discord for our Patreon subscribers and our YouTube channel subscribers. But we've got rumors here that perhaps the Alberta government, Danielle Smith, is considering, this is Kathy that'll get credit on this one, says she saw NDP MLA Marie Renaud out of St. Albert mentioning they're expecting an early election sometime next year. Kathy says she's hoping for that. Of course, you'll remember Premier Danielle Smith in the studio a few months ago now, and we asked her directly about this. I said, hey, there's a lot of rumblings about an early election. She says, I'm not really thinking about that. I don't think so. I said, so will you commit right now? Are you saying right now on the record that you will not hold an election in 2026? And I don't remember her exact answer. With politicians, you always got to be careful because they'll leave themselves a little wiggle room to later clarify what they actually meant. But she essentially said that that's not part of our plan. It has been a rumor that's kind of been going for quite some time. I think, people probably paying attention to a few things. There, I think, forefront among them, you've got that RCMP investigation into allegations around the Alberta Health Services procurement deals. Yeah. This was that MH Care stuff. Everybody remembers it. The playoff tickets. Obviously, the story's quite a bit bigger than that. There was some speculation that the government could try to get ahead of the release of those findings. Of course, they were waiting on what the Auditor General had to say, and of course, what the RCMP will have to say about that. Yeah. We know from that Jason Kenney leadership experience. Remember those allegations about Jeff the Callaway? Is that right? The kamikaze candidate. The kamikaze candidate, they called him. That was sent in to try to demolish Brian Jean's chances of winning that United Conservative Party leadership. You remember that RCMP investigation? I think the findings were released. And by the way, the National Police Force essentially saying there was much ado about nothing there. Basically, everybody exonerated in that circumstance. But it had taken years for those results to come out. So you wonder, a lot of folks are thinking, well, maybe the UCP might try to get ahead of the release of these findings or ahead of what the RCMP has to say by calling an election next year. And then you also have to look at the momentum or lack thereof that the Alberta NDP is experiencing right now under their new leader, Naheed Nenshi, who in theory was supposed to roll in and not fill Rachel Notley's shoes. He was going to bring his own purple shoes to the dance.
Yeah.
And he was going to sort of put his own stamp on the Alberta NDP. And I think, generally speaking, with all due respect, I think the shoes they're not grippy enough. They've not gained the traction that the official opposition would need to make a significant impact in the Alberta legislature, and more importantly, to make a significant impact in the minds of voters.
I think it's like I equate it to when like a new app comes out, like a new social media app. Everyone signs up the first week. There's
Blue
a lot
sky.
of hullabaloo, and then a few months later, you're not really posting. You're just kind of like sending your posts from other social medias to there, right?
I forgot I had a Threads account the other day. And then I realized all my Facebook stuff's just getting posted right to Threads.
Yeah, I get a notification sometimes like, 100 people have viewed this or whatever. I didn't post that. Also, I know we're going to talk about this later in the week. It was in the news this morning. I'll just bring it to your attention. Like, if they don't figure this out today or tomorrow, Air Canada going on strike. So, basically, there's like the different section of air workers. They're just down to the flight attendants, stewardesses, whatever you want to call them. They have not reached a deal in that area. Pilots, all the other have kind of come to an agreement. This is the last part of it. But, man, if in 24 hours this doesn't happen, I was listening this morning to the radio and just talking to some friends. I have some friends in Europe right now who are like, we're already looking for other ways to get home because we're coming home Sunday, and this could be Friday. No flights out of Air Canada.
Well, yeah, they're expecting. So the flight attendants union, the union representing Air Canada's flight attendants, essentially served a 72-hour strike notice.
Yeah.
Now, again, this doesn't guarantee it's going to happen.
But it's gotten farther than I thought it would at this point. I thought things would be over with by now. So, like, we're at the dead. Like, if they don't figure it out today, flights don't go Friday or Saturday. That's even one day of air travel down is a domino effect, right, for the industry.
Of course. Yeah. Not only does it screw people's plans in thousands of different ways, but of course also, like you said, you miss your flight on Saturday, you got to get on your flight Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. A lot of these flights may be sold out already, so this is obviously going to wreak havoc for a lot of people. The two sides, CUPE, the national union, and of course Air Canada, essentially saying that they have reached an impasse in talks, paving the way for more than 10,000 workers to walk off the job as early as Saturday morning. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the two presidents, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, will meet in Alaska about 24 hours after we record this episode, and all eyes are on that meeting.
What a flex for Putin, who is used to the cold weather, and Trump, who is in Mar-a-Lago all the time. He's immediately got home ice advantage, Putin, there with the weather.
Yeah, and a lot of people, we'll get into this with our guest in just a moment, but a lot of folks are looking back. They're rewinding the clock about 7 years to Finland when the two met previously. And, for all intents and purposes, including an assessment from Trump's former senior advisor, it was an absolute disaster the last time they spoke. Trump comes out of the mind bender, basically, repeating Russia's talking points. And I think that there's concerns right now, especially in light of what's happening with Russia's war in Ukraine, that the same thing could happen at the world's most powerful human being, the commander-in-chief of the world's largest military, could come out of here going, we kind of stand with Russia. They're going to be talking about, they've said, the two leaders, land swaps.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that.
And those attacks in Ukraine, I know this has kind of fallen down the docket. Like, we talked about this as we're talking about Israel, Gaza, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the attacks on Ukraine have not stopped, and they've in fact gotten worse. More civilian casualties with all these newer attacks that are happening now. And again, a country that, if I compare it to Gaza or something like that, the pictures we're seeing now, people are living in rubble. This is a destroyed nation. It's which at the start of the war, remember all the wins that Ukraine had? They were holding off Russia. It looked like a good outcome was coming, and now this, and all the questions to Trump in the interviews. He's so passive about it, right? You said you were going to end the war with Russia and Ukraine within the first, week of your presidency. Why not? Well, we're going to see what Putin says. We're going to see what he says. Why? And this is just my opinion, no one else's, but why is he giving Putin all the cards to say whether this stops or when it stops? It seems like in all other aspects of his presidency, he takes the big chair. I'm the one calling the shots, and this is the one instance in which he kind of bows down.
Well, this all comes back to everybody speculating that the Russians have video of Trump doing something.
Epstein,
right? Yeah, well, maybe. Interesting. Emmanuel Macron out of France. Stating, just a few hours before we're doing this show, that he believes and that European leaders have been led to believe that Trump will prioritize Ukrainian representation in some way, shape, or form at that meeting, which is providing a modicum of hope that maybe something positive could come out of this. Maybe it all comes down as well to Trump chasing down that Nobel Peace Prize that everybody knows.
I was just going to say that, but his last meeting with Zelensky, I mean, yeah, sure, get Zelensky in the room, but he's been emasculated by the president, so it does not look good. But we'll have to. I think all eyes. I mean, this is all anyone's talking about is this meeting between Putin and Trump.
For sure. We'll shout out to Dubious as well before we get to our feature interview here. Dubious says, "Who's dodging Wi-Fi?" He says, "I'm listening in today from another campsite."
When you said
from
that,
Dubious streaming us from the campsite, I feel like that should earn Dubious a special prize.
I was like, "You're crazy saying this." I just upgraded. Like, I keep a Wi-Fi hub in my backpack for
you need
DJing.
it.
Yeah, just to have my own kind of Wi-Fi network whenever I'm DJing or whatever. Go out to Vegreville, do in some rural area in a bar, and I need internet, right? So, and I just upgraded mine to like 5G and the biggest Bluetooth.
Work pretty well?
It works really well. So I would say that I never want to be in a situation without Wi-Fi, but I do understand the whole whole concept of turning off your phone and getting away and going on vacation and leaving your phone, by the pool or in the hotel room while you're relaxing.
Shout out to Erin, who's making her return to the Real Talk Live chat. She says to my friends, referring, this is an old school reference. I love this. She says, gives a shout out to the Chatterbox. She says, it's been a while. I hope everybody's been having a great summer thus far. Let's find out how this fine fella's been doing through the summer months. You know him. You love him. He was our regular weekly guest until the Prime Minister tapped him on the shoulder, appointing him as Canadian senator, proudly representing his home province of Manitoba. He is the subject of our feature interview today, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. He is Senator Charles Adler. It's nice to see you, pal.
Nice to see you, Ryan. I think that if Trump can figure out how we can keep China as a customer of Canadian canola, perhaps that will put him over the top.
Yeah.
In winning the Nobel Prize.
Do you think that Donald Trump will be thinking about Canada for more than 5 seconds through this meeting? This is the highest profile meeting between world leaders, at least since the G7 in Kananaskis, and arguably maybe even bigger than that, to be honest.
Well, I tell you, the tip-off that Putin will get whatever he wants, the tip-off that Putin owns Donald Trump, and it doesn't matter why, maybe because they have so-called compromising stuff on what Donald Trump may or may not have done on the sheets many years ago. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. It's really clear that Russia has the upper hand. This isn't really this is honestly, and I hate to say this, but I have to. This is like a martial arts champion, right? This is like an ultra fighting champion, arm wrestling a hamster. Putin gets so much deference from Donald Trump, gets so much respect from Donald Trump, and at some point it really doesn't matter why. But you know that Putin has the advantage when Donald Trump, not once but twice, says that he's going to Russia to meet Putin. Now, of course, he's going to Alaska, and yes, Alaska at one time used to be Russian. But that isn't the point. The fact that Donald Trump is saying he is going to Russia to try to get Putin to make some sort of agreement tells you that Donald Trump feels that the Russians have the upper hand. Otherwise, why would he have said that not once but twice in the same press conference?
Yeah, so like Americans that are old enough, you don't have to be that old, quite frankly, but to remember the Cold War, that are old enough to remember, Ronald Reagan's demands to Mikhail Gorbachev. They're old enough to remember the uncertainty, the Cuban Missile Crisis, that kind of whole era. And of course here in Canada, I guess for us it was more like the 72 Super Series that had the Russians or the Soviets all over our radar. But what's the average American, including Trump voters, 70 million of them, supposed to be thinking right now? Where's your head at? You spent years in Boston, you know the American mindset well. Yeah. Where do you think Americans should be at? Where do you think they are at?
I don't think most Americans really care about saving Ukraine's honor and saving Ukraine's land. I think that many Americans, especially those people who vote for Donald Trump, and there are others who say they don't vote for him, but come election time they do. It's interesting to see all these polls saying, "Oh, if there's an election right now, Kamala Harris would beat Donald Trump." Well, like I say, that's always the case when you look at the polls before an election. In an actual election, many Americans believe that Donald Trump is the ultimate deal maker, and if Donald Trump tells them that he did a deal for world peace and a deal which will save lives, Russian lives, Ukrainian lives, potentially European lives, then many people will tend to believe him. He is an incredible salesman. We can say all kinds of things about him, that we can throw rocks at the Americans. I've thrown the odd rock myself. But there's one thing that I cannot get over, and that's the incredible amount of confidence that the Americans have in him. And all you have to do is look at the stock market. There was a time when, people didn't understand why Bill Clinton wasn't in more trouble over the Monica Lewinsky thing and the Paula Jones thing. And I remember saying to American audiences when I was working down there that Americans care far more about the Dow Jones than Paula Jones. And the fact is the Dow Jones is in record territory every single day. And many Canadians are, of course, invested in the U.S. stock market. Of course, many of our pension funds, including the Canada Pension Plan, invest in the U.S. stock market. Something is going on as far as confidence in Donald Trump, and the people with influence, the people with money, and even people with not much money, but they've still got some money in the stock market, tend to believe in him. And I cannot overstate how important that is. And the thing about Donald Trump, the thing about the United States and Canada is many people in Canada are still complacent about trade, because they keep hearing this number that somewhere between 80 and 90% of what we trade with the U.S. Is protected under what we used to call NAFTA, and then it became called CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement. Well, that thing runs out next year. Does anybody really believe today that thing will not have to be severely and seriously amended the way Donald Trump wants to severely and seriously amend it for us to have that? Imagine if we're talking next year at this time, imagine a Canadian world where we don't have that particular free trade agreement with the States. And Ryan, I'll ask you the question. Do you believe that's a done deal? Do you believe that we'll have absolutely no trouble having the same agreement with the Americans that we have right now?
Well, no, I was actually
the NAFTA thing.
If you weren't an Emmy Award-winning broadcaster with an RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award, I would have interrupted you like 3 sentences ago, because I don't actually feel like when we're talking about CUSMA expiring next year, when we're talking about negotiating the next manifestation of, or the next version of a free trade agreement, it almost feels comical, because it feels like the existing one is pointless and is not being respected at all by the White House. At least the spirit of free trade has been grossly compromised. That's probably the safest thing I've said all month.
Well, the spirit of free trade is compromised, but it is costing us tons of money. And there's this complacency. There's this idea that, well, if the Americans don't buy our crap, other people will. It doesn't work that way. You've got businesses invested in this program. You're a business person yourself. This idea that if you lose your top client, in this case, the United States, that buys over 80% of what we grow, what we sell, okay? This idea that if you lose your top client as a business person, you can just replace that client with a bunch of smaller clients. That's not true. So I'm not trying to be alarmist here, but we can pontificate about the Middle East, and we can pontificate about Ukraine. We can pontificate about the attack on democracy that Donald Trump poses. But I would say that if our number one priority as a country right now, if it isn't doing a deal, and it won't necessarily be a deal that we love, the politics are simple. Canada will only do a deal that's in Canada's interest. Well, yeah, that's easy to say. But the point is, we need a deal. If we don't have a deal with the United States next year at this time, we are in a heap of trouble.
Yeah, I'll just kind of chime in on I agree. There's like this hidden support for Trump that Charles alluded to. If you look at numbers, his approval ratings are all down. They're all down. Immigration approval down to 41%, overall job approval down to 37%, net approval down 10%, favorable versus unfavorable 44 to 52%, independence net approval down like 30%. But there's like this ghost support that Charles alluded to, where people still support him, but kind of in the background.
Well, yeah, and I think that there's also part of it where and like this is just politics, but there's part of it where there are Trump supporters that'll run through walls for Trump. There's part of it that are Republicans that it's Republican or nobody, and there are probably, I mean, we talked a little bit about the Alberta NDP. How do I put it? This is kind of their wandering in the desert moment, at least in recent memory. You could probably say the same thing about the Democrats, Chuck. Like, I don't see really strong. I heard Scott Galloway talking about this, Prof G, the other day. Like, there's not a strong heir apparent. You don't get the sense that the party has groomed its next leader. Sure, you can throw some names out there, but all of this comes back to what Johnny's talking about, is that really politicians can survive dips in approval ratings if they happen at the right times, right?
Ryan, we are all consumers, and Trump is a big, big brand, and the Democratic Party is a shrinking brand. So Johnny can talk about all these approval numbers and disapproval numbers, and I'm not saying that Johnny's not being accurate, and I'm not saying that Johnny's not being relevant. I would never say that, especially now that he's doing some interesting things to his hair. Johnny Infamous is more relevant than ever. But, and here's there's always a big fat but in the things that we talk about. The big fat but is, in a world where brands matter, Donald Trump's brand is a lot bigger than the Democratic Party brand. So I would not underestimate Donald Trump's ability to continue to do everything that he wants to do. And I just want to emphasize that Canada has got to come to the realization that at some point we absolutely have to make a deal with him. And it will not necessarily be a deal that's better than the one we have. It will likely be worse, but no deal is much worse. No deal is much worse than a deal that we're not thrilled with. That's a very tough pill for people to swallow. By
the way, Jillian is complimenting you on your ensemble this morning. She says Adler is back in all black. She says back in black. Maybe we'd love to give you the AC/DC music bed underneath your comments, but of course we'd be shut down for copyright infringement. We can't make it happen. A shout out from Jillian. Randy's in here. Randy says, hey, everybody remember when a coalition of Canadian farmers put a ton of dough together and presented to the Prime Minister at that time, Stephen Harper, in order to purchase the Canadian wheat board. He says then Harper basically told him to pound sand and sold it to the Saudis. Interesting timing from Randy. Check this out. Family members of Ken Motiak. I'm not sure if you've seen this book before, Chuck. Just actually dropped this off for our review. It's like, I haven't even had it long enough to crack the book, but I'm interested to get into it. Culture of Control, Farming with the Shackles of the Canadian Wheat Board. Interesting book. I'm interested to get into it, and I was particularly interested to see Randy bring that up. When we're talking about Canadian industries, who would you, and again, we're asking you to speculate here, and let me issue the caveat for you. You've not yet done it, but it recurs through these interviews, and it should, that you're speaking on behalf of yourself as an individual, Charles Adler, not speaking on behalf of the Canadian Senate, obviously. Right. But if you're working in this industry, you're particularly concerned about the next agreement with the United States. What is it ag? Is it auto manufacturing? Is it all of the above?
It is absolutely all of the above. By the way, when it comes to auto manufacturing, what is it that we're getting out of the tariff that we've got on China, essentially preventing Canadians
EVs?
from buying these Chinese EVs, which apparently are really popular in Europe and in other parts of the world? The Chinese apparently are making a great vehicle. And not only that, but, we always perceive EVs as expensive because they are more expensive than the regular fossil fuel cars. The Chinese EV is not just really good, it's really cheap.
It's like half the price.
If you could just tell me, as my fellow Canadian, what is it that we're getting out of keeping Chinese EVs out of Canada? What's the upside?
I'm not smart enough to answer these questions. I mean, I guess, part of me believes that it's, the policy is in part to satiate the United States. Part of me believes that it's a bit of a protectionist strategy to protect, obviously, not just jobs, but also goods that are manufactured in Canada. But I don't know. What would you say?
Well, I don't know. At the moment, whatever we're not doing with the United States is pissing off our number one customer, the United States. And in many cases, China is our number two customer, especially when it comes to agriculture. And clearly that matters to Albertans. So if we're POing the Chinese because we're not allowing their excellent cars from coming into Canada, I'm trying to figure out what the upside is. And I don't know why we don't do the kind of deal with the Chinese that the Americans want to do with different countries and say, we'd like to allow your Chinese EVs to be sold in Canada. As a matter of fact, you could really convince us it's a great idea if you build at least one or two car plants in Canada. What would be wrong with having China? We've got Japanese-made cars built in Canada, obviously American cars built in Canada. What would be so terrible if we want to be taken seriously on the world stage and want to be taken seriously by the Americans if we decided to build Chinese cars in Canada? And yes, that could happen if we open up our minds a little bit and stop pretending that 2025 is 1955 and 1985. We're in a brand new world. And just once again, as a fellow Canadian, and we're both drivers, what's wrong with the idea of, and I don't want anyone talking about how the Chinese product is not good, because I want to remind everyone, I've got this up to the video. I know many people are listening to this on audio. I've got my iPhone up to the camera here. For anyone who wants to think that the Chinese product is inferior, all you have to do is look at your iPhone, and it's made not in Nebraska, not in Alberta. It's made in China, and it's the best in the world.
It'd be like $4,000 if it was made in Nebraska.
Yeah. Some of the benefits and downsides, this reporting from McLean's, just a few here, I'll say. The benefits of restricting Chinese EVs, they say protecting domestic industry and jobs, strategic trade alignment, preventing undercutting by low-cost imports. The downsides and risks, I think we all know these: higher prices, slower EV adoption, retaliation from China, and limited effectiveness for domestic manufacturing.
Yeah, well, and listen, if we truly believe in a free market, then isn't this the exact sort of thing? Wouldn't you like to see government policy reflect? Obviously, at a high level, there's the strategy that goes into these $1 trillion negotiations when you're talking about the big picture, context, and trade, like you said, with the United States, our most important trading partner. But Charles, we're also we're not entering an era. We are in an era, although I think for the average Canadian, we're not quite yet used to it. You remember back in the day, I mean, obviously you're going to remember, but like when Jean Chrétien said, we're not going into Iraq with the Americans, and it was like a no pun intended, but it was like a bombshell, because nobody was accustomed to Canada's foreign policy in conflict with the United States. Nobody was used to or seeing Canada not immediately step up side by side with the Americans. But we're now in a day and age where, obviously, you talk to anybody in business. Shauna Feth's going to join us next week, from the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. We hear from our friends in business, the entrepreneurs, all the time. The last thing they're looking for is tension with the United States. And yes, they all acknowledge that we need to explore new export markets. We need to diversify as best we can. But to suggest that the American consumer can be replaced, most people will tell you that that's a pipe dream. If our economy is going to continue to thrive or grow with another trading partner, though a single trading partner aside from the Americans, it has to be China. So why on earth wouldn't the Canadian government? China's not, obviously there have been some issues. The Huawei executive being arrested on behalf of the Americans and detained just off that border crossing in Vancouver was obviously a big deal. The Chinese were pissed about that. The two Michaels obviously detained in China for quite some time. There have been some tensions. But at the same time, I would feel like Mark Carney's government, the Liberal government, would probably have the green light from Canadians to explore a more friendly relationship with the Chinese, wouldn't you think?
Well, we're at the moment, we're totally dependent on the number one superpower in the world. And if that superpower is not going to, for various reasons, allow as much of our stuff to be sold in the United States, then yes, we've got to do a deal with the number two superpower. And that's China. And no, we're not going to like everything about how the Chinese govern themselves. Lord knows we don't like everything about how the Americans are governing ourselves. But we don't have this privilege to determine how people do government. We do have a responsibility to the people who work in this country to provide jobs for them. And the only way that people in this country will continue to work, and the only way people in this country will continue to have opportunity, is if we have an intelligent business. Let's just focus on this. It's not personal. It's not about democracy. We have to have an intelligent business relationship with the world, especially the United States and China.
In our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, Kathy says that you guarantee Prime Minister Carney's already taking steps, making plans for the option that Kuzma, this trade agreement, doesn't work out again. This is basically NAFTA 2.0 for anybody. Peter just throws out a bouquet. He says, I'm just very grateful to see Senator Adler on your show today. And Cliff says, oh, you better believe Canada is losing supply management. Says there's no path forward without it. Cliff says, truth be told, it likely should go, as it represents less than 1% of Canada's GDP. Before I get your take on that, Chuck, let me just remind people back on the 13th of June, you can find this in our podcast archive or on our YouTube channel. Thanks to all of our subscribers. Rob Breckenridge, our former radio colleague, and my cousin, Graham Jespersen, who's raising the 6th generation of Jespersen dairy farmers in Stony Plain, just west of Edmonton, gave us their takes, 2 different perspectives on whether or not Canada has milked supply management for too long. You think that could be on the table? Maxime Bernier flirted with it to try to draw conservative voters, but it seemed like the mainstream conservative leadership has had really no appetite for blowing that up. Of course, we're talking about eggs, milk, dairy.
Well, everything's on the table, and if Mark Carney at some point says the only way that we could do a deal to save hundreds of thousands of jobs in Canada was to sacrifice some of supply management, then people in the country will accept it. I'm not saying that some of your family that's in the dairy business will like it, but my guess is if some of supply management is sacrificed, people in the dairy businesses and the other businesses that are protected by supply management, whether it's poultry, whether it's you name it, if they're right now dependent on supply management, if that's the system with the quotas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the Canadian government will likely compensate them. So short term, that won't be a problem. But I can tell you this, if the only thing preventing Canada and the States, the only thing preventing them from doing a substantive agreement is supply management, there's no way on earth that Mark Carney won't sacrifice a bit on supply management. Think about the politics on the other side. If we find out that we've got a massive gun to our heads when it comes to jobs, and there's no deal, and then we find out that the only reason there wasn't a deal was because Canada did not want to sacrifice the dairy farmers, people across the country will not tolerate that. People across the country will not applaud the Carney government, say, yay, yay, yay. Yes, we're going to lose 200,000 jobs in this country, but we saved the dairy farmers. I cannot imagine living in a Canada where Mark Carney looks like a hero for doing that.
I'll give my cousin, I'll give Graham some credit here, and I want to be careful when I paraphrase what he said, because he joined us for like a very thoughtful 30-40 minutes, but I was actually surprised by his position. He basically said, let me put it this way, my understanding of what he said is that he's completely fine with the idea of getting rid of supply management. And he basically told us, this is my layperson's interpretation, that he believes that his farm could swim, not sink, under either scenario. Now, obviously, he's speaking for himself, but he was much more open-minded to it than I expected. This is very divisive. Like, I hosted the Nisku Energy show a few months ago. They did such a wonderful job just south of Edmonton. This was incredible to see, Alberta's energy industry of like yesteryear, today, and tomorrow all coming together and showcasing everything that they're doing. And I had a couple of beef ranchers come up. They're real talkers. Sure appreciate hearing from them. Nobody's more pissed about the government protectionist element of supply management than beef ranchers, right? I find it very interesting. Like both, in the dairy business and the beef business, they're both raising cattle, but the landscape, their business reality is very different. Regulations are very different. And generally speaking, the beef guys let me know that they would love to see supply management evaporate.
Well, look, nobody believes that Alberta ranchers need supply management because they don't. And so if you were to simply say to the average person in Alberta, so is the beef industry doing well? Well, yeah. Is the pork industry doing well? Yeah. Well, do you think that that we wouldn't have a dairy industry without supply management? I think the average person would say, well, if the ranchers can get along without it, the dairy people can as well. My guess is that Your cousin believes that. I don't think anybody who's got a serious dairy business in this country believes that the only way they can stay in business is with supply management. Supply management is a throwback. Now, most politicians, especially those who are concerned about forming national government where they need Ontario and Quebec, and supply management is pretty popular in Ontario and Quebec. Sure. More popular there than it would be in Alberta. The idea of them publicly giving up on supply management or saying that it's negotiable, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
so
100%.
First of all, I don't think all of supply management would be sacrificed, but we've been surrendering pieces of it over the years. But if we surrender another couple of pieces, or if we surrender a large piece in the interests of a much larger deal with the United States, if that's something that needs to be surrendered and sacrificed, that'll happen. But you cannot expect liberal or conservative politicians at this point to say, yeah, it's on the table, but you can take this to the bank.
Yeah,
it's on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And what negotiator tells the general public exactly what cards they're willing to play before they go into negotiations or mid-negotiations? It doesn't happen. If you ask the average consumer, like, stop, 10 Canadians on the street anywhere in the country, aside from maybe like you said, the real dairy farming communities where people may be a little bit more savvy in their understanding of how this works. You ask 10 Canadians on the street how supply management works, the reasons behind it, or how it impacts their selection in the dairy aisle, and I would wager a guess that not one or two of them could accurately represent it. I would just say that the average consumer probably wants more options, minimum, quality assurances, a minimum bar for entry into the Canadian markets. They want to make sure that they can afford to feed their family. And as they see grocery prices rising, they probably would be willing to explore other options. So there are obviously many proud Canadian consumers. I still see it. I was in a liquor store just the other day, and they still had the majority of their American wines off the shelf. It was obvious. And they brought in many more Canadian wines. So the Canadian consumer is still there, but there are still a lot of people that if they can get a big block of cheese for like 40% of what it costs from a Canadian farmer, they're happy to support the Americans. I would also say this. I think it'd be pretty rich if you and I are going to sit here and chat about how, we think that supply management is an institution that needs to be protected in Canada. And then we're going to talk about how we should lift the tariffs and allow Chinese EVs to infiltrate the Canadian market, right? Like, you either believe in consumer choice and free markets or you don't.
Well, I'm a free market person. I mean, that's just the way I wired. More freedom is better than less freedom, whether we talk about political freedom or economic freedom. I want people to have maximum choice, and I don't, on a personal level, it's difficult to get me to say that I really don't think that we should have a choice when it comes to cheese. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just not wired that way. We can buy cheese cheese products from countries all over the world, and the idea that our wonderful dairy producers, without a whole lot of protection, can't continue to be wonderful dairy producers. I just think it's I think it's ridiculous. The problem is that we have our values, our so-called Canadian values, and then they're infected by all kinds of politics. And the politics is always protected by, well, this is the way things have always been. And Ryan, both of us have been in the media business for a long time now. Every time we're working with, and thank goodness you're an independent now, but when we're not independents, when we're working for corporations, whenever we get management types telling us that we can't move forward with where the consumer is, where the Johnnies are, we can't do that because we have to continue to do things the way we've always been doing them. We always think that manager is intellectually lazy, and of course we use other words when we're not public about that. But the point is, we disparage them, and I disparage anybody in this country or any country that says the only reason we're continuing to do something the way we are is because that's the way it's always been. When you and I are driving our cars and our trucks, whether they're fossil fuel, electric, or whatever, we are looking forward. Okay. Yes, we have a rear view mirror, but most of our focus is not on the rear view. And if most of our focus was in the rear view, we'd have a lot of accidents, a lot more than we have right now.
Erica DeRed says, I know that marketing boards, she says, are run by farmers in those sectors. So that means that, the few farmers on these boards are imposing restrictions to the many. She says Canada has over 80 agricultural marketing boards. White-Dream is quite right in the chat, saying getting rid of supply management could destroy family-owned and operated dairy farms outright. It's possible. It's a little bit apples and oranges, but I think that, for purposes of comparison, it's, you could look at, family-owned companies or independent operators that owned taxi licenses or that own taxi licenses, these taxi plates. I remember when the story flared up with Uber fighting to get into our home city, Chuck, of Edmonton. Johnny, what was that, like 10 years ago or something like that, 8 years ago? Obviously the cabbies were like furious for obvious reasons, storming City Hall and demanding to be heard. Some of these guys, you feel absolutely sick for them because they've paid out. Well, I remember doing an interview with a guy that claimed that he had paid, and probably did, $225,000. He had financed it to be able to buy this. It was an investment in his business, right? So he buys this $250,000 taxi plate, and then all of a sudden Uber can roll in with minimal restrictions, and the ride-sharing apps basically take over, and that's a fact, and that's a reality all around the world right now. And to a certain degree, I do absolutely feel bad for people that get screwed like that. I remember I told you this story before years ago about my buddy out of high school. Him and his dad started up a payphone business. I'm sure by the end of it, his bottom line didn't look so great as everybody got their smartphone. I mean, industry moves on, business moves on. I do not mean to sound, my intention is not to come across as unsympathetic to dairy farmers and other entrepreneurs. I understand why, if your bread and butter, no pun intended, is based on the value of your quota, in other words, how much milk protein you're allowed to produce under the supply management formula, obviously you're going to fight to keep it, obviously.
Look, if everything was being run that way, here's the way our lives would look. This podcast would not exist because the companies like the one that stupidly got rid of you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, that company would get protection. And
that company's about to need bankruptcy protection, by the way. Well, Carry on.
That's an interesting.
Not that we're taking joy in that.
We may discuss someday. But we can talk about radio. We can say, well, we don't expect the government to be protecting radio companies by stopping people like Ryan Jespersen from doing podcasts. When it comes to talk about food, fine. Let's talk about the food that we actually see every day. Most of us who live in the urban and suburban areas of this country, which is over 80% of the people in this country, we go to supermarkets. Imagine if there was only one supermarket, the government supermarket, or one large corporation that was protected by the government. Can you imagine what prices would be like? We don't like the prices at the supermarket right now. Can you imagine what the prices would be like if they had no competition at all?
Charles, as a public service to our audience, we're just going to roll out the first ever Real Talk Market Watch. And today's feature stock is that of Chorus Entertainment, which is currently trading at 9.5 cents, which will be disappointing to investors to see it down 13.6% year over year, a remarkable drop from the $18 it was trading at when I was hired. Charles Adler, our guest, Canadian senator out of the proud province of Manitoba. This interview, feature interview, presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. More from the good senator in just a second. We'll pick up our conversation. We had a ton of comments in our. As soon as we started talking Air Canada, Johnny, did you see what happened in our live chat? We've got Air Canada family members in here. We got Air Canada travelers in here. Obviously, this is something that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And that Canada Post story, that's not all said and done either. Keep in mind, that's another Canadian institution that's looking at serious reforms if it wants to survive. More with Senator Adler in just a sec. But in the meantime, why don't we head out to the mountains? Once a week, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to step outside, breathe that fresh air, remind ourselves of the memories that lie in wait, and we love when Real Talkers share their Jasper memories with us. And that's exactly what Real Talkers Craig and Robyn have done. They're just back from Jasper National Park, where as part of a whirlwind visit, the two of them threw on their hiking boots, grabbed their 3-liter Camelbacks, took water and a couple granola bars with them, and hit the Skyline Trail. This is absolutely incredible. These photos, I know you're listening on the podcast. You got to watch these ones. These My Jasper memories on YouTube. This trail, Craig tells us, has been on their radar for like a decade. And the 1-year anniversary of the Jasper fire is what prompted these two to make it happen. And so they traveled from the north point of the Skyline Trail at Moline to Signal Mountain, which is the south point. These visuals are absolutely astounding. They met a cab, they said, at 6 a.m. In Jasper, parked their truck at the Signal Mountain trailhead. Their driver said he had 2 other trips scheduled. He said that's down from what they see in other years, but, he's been a slower summer. Everybody says they're optimistic that there's going to be an uptick in activity. And by the way, keep in mind, fall is an amazing time to hit that Skyline Trail. He says in total, the trail offers 46 kilometers with about 1,700 meters elevation. So that'll resonate with the hikers. Took them, and keep in mind, they're not carrying the big heavy packs. They did this in one day. These animals, I love it. About 9 hours to finish for these two, he said. But again, the trail was pretty wet when they went out there, so it slowed them down a little bit. He says the cloud cover was low, so they didn't get the full view experience, he said, but it added such a mystique. He says that cloud cover added its own element to the experience. These photos are incredible. He says finishing through Signal Mountain, the final 8-9 kilometers are along a fire road through the remnants of last year's blaze. Craig tells us that the destruction was extensive but impressive. He says the trees look like burnt matchsticks that are kind of bending over, but the wildflowers, look at that there. And I just got chills. The bright green leaves of new growth emerging from the forest floor, he says, provided a beautiful contrast to those charred remains of last year's fire. Craig says the clearing now offers much more impressive views of the valley, which actually makes that final 9K a lot more enjoyable. In summary, Craig and Robyn tell us Jasper's still obviously an absolute gem with stunning scenery and wildlife. He says that they saw 3 moose during their journey, multiple elk. They saw sheep, eagles. They got to see the marmots, John, a rare sighting there, and even a black bear. He says it was an absolutely incredible experience. Our thanks to Real Talkers Craig and Robyn for sharing this with us. If you're feeling inspired by this, how can you not be by looking at their photos? I want you to check out CanadianSkylineAdventures.com. I'm showing it to you on my screen right now. This is a relatively small hiking business that's operated by Christian, a Jasper local. He focuses on offering authentic, educational, safe, and obviously beautiful guided hikes and guided running in Jasper National Park. You don't have to have a week at your disposal. You could make it a day trip. You could make it a multi-day trip. Again, that's Canadian Skyline Adventures. You can see them online, CanadianSkylineAdventures.com. We'll link to it in the show notes. And, of course, for all things Jasper, make sure you visit Tourism Jasper's website. That's jasper.travel. Between now and September 2nd, you've basically got till the Labor Day weekend. Parks Canada offering free admission to all travelers, plus 25% off camping fees at participating locations. You can learn all the details online at jasper.travel. My Jasper Memories presented weekly here on Real Talk by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Adler, we got to get you out to Jasper. When's the last time? I mean, obviously, you took on a lot when you agreed to serve your country as a senator. But when's the last time you actually took a few days to yourself and got out to the mountains? We got to get you out there.
I'm in Jasper in about 8 or 9 years.
Oh, we got to do something about that.
I don't know whether people would buy the idea of yours truly with Ryan Jespersen enjoying Jasper. I don't know whether they would call it serving their country, but if the Canadian public is willing to give me that kind of forbearance, if they're okay with me saying I'm in Jasper but I'm serving my country, I'll take it.
Well, I think that if our most recent dinner together, the last time we were in person, is any indication, I think that we could single-handedly keep the Jasper Brewing Company afloat for at least a month.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
but it's serious. I mean, I'm not saying this because of your Jasper memories and all the rest of it, but I've been very privileged much of my adult life, courtesy of the Canadian public that has supported me by buying advertising on all the stations that I was on. So I'm always very grateful for that. But I have to say that there was no bigger privilege as a Canadian than being able to spend time in Jasper. It's the most beautiful part of the planet.
Sure is. This is going to be torture for real talkers that are listening in from the Maritimes or from Ontario. They have a flight booked on Air Canada. They're going to be flying into the Edmonton International Airport or flying into Calgary, maybe hit the Icefields Parkway. They were planning on getting out to Jasper, but it looks like they won't. I don't want to be a pessimist, but when 72-hour strike notice is served, unless there's 11th hour heroics. It looks like Air Canada's flight attendants, 10,000 of them, will be going on strike. Where's your head at with this? I talked to a friend yesterday who said that he found it hard to believe that there wasn't some sort of a work to rule or some sort of a stipulation that would force these flight attendants to work, considering the integral nature or the integral role that Air Canada plays in travel across this country. Where are you at with this one?
I don't know. I just remember that we talked in the same manner about the pilots, and at the last minute there was a settlement. I wouldn't not that I just want to be an optimist for the purpose of optimism, although I do find that optimism is a much better way of approaching life than the other thing, which will probably lead us to the Pierre Poilievre discussion.
Sure.
I do think optimism is a lot more attractive. I'm still optimistic that they'll settle. I don't believe the flight. I believe the flight attendants want to have the strike threat looming as a bargaining tool. I meet the Air Canada flight attendants like almost every week, and I really don't see them as wanting to strike. And I do think that at the last minute, as it were, just as we had with the pilots, there will be some sort of agreement.
It's always interesting, and I know I feel like I've been offering nothing but disclaimers this entire episode, but I do it sincerely. Very rarely do you see big groups, big unions that actually want to strike. I don't think that letter carriers and Canada Post employees across the country want to strike. I highly doubt that Air Canada's flight attendants want to strike. You know who wants to strike? Alberta's teachers. I don't speak for every single one of them, but I'll tell you, we get notes to the show all the time. Some of you've seen the results. Like off the top of my head, forgive me if I'm off by a point or two, but approximately 95% of them have voted to strike, and I feel like everybody's just waiting for that hammer to drop this fall. For a lot of people, you're going, the day after Labor Day, kids are back to school. Don't count on it, parents.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic about the flight attendants reaching a deal than the teachers. Everything involving education in Alberta right now is highly politicized. I don't envy the teachers, but I really don't envy the parents. It's not reliable. What's interesting to me is earlier the way you were describing Nenchi's shoes, and to stay with the shoe metaphor, his purple shoes, as it were. Purple suede shoes would be very, very interesting wardrobe.
Yeah.
In my opinion, for Nenchi. But,
John Fluvog could design them for him.
But just to extend I am actually surprised because I'm the one who called Nenchi a warrior. He was upset that I used war.
Yeah,
language.
he didn't like that.
Obviously I didn't mean it literally, and obviously I also don't like being preached to by Naheed Nenchi.
I thought that was a really weird pushback,
English.
To be honest. I quite like interviews with Nenchi, but when he lamented the war metaphor when you called him a warrior in the middle of a leadership race, I thought it was bizarre.
Well, my answer to that is, take the compliment, pal. When I call you a warrior, that is a compliment.
Yeah.
Take it. Don't start telling me how to speak the English language.
It's better than calling him a waffler.
But the thing is, when Nenchi or anybody else starts to tell me how to, speak English, that's when my conservative backbone flares.
Sure.
If there's one thing about modern day liberalism, progressivism that I really can't stand is having my vocabulary micromanaged. I may not be the most articulate son of a bitch in the world, but I know how to speak my language. I know how to speak English. I know how to speak Canadians, and I don't need Naheed Nenchi to tell me how to speak. But having said all of that, to extend the shoe metaphor just a little bit here, I am surprised, because I do have a lot of respect for Nenchi's political skills. I am surprised that his footprint right now in Alberta politics is not larger. It is still very much the Danielle Smith show.
Yeah, and I guess like for a while, I don't say he got a pass, but like the fact that he was waiting for that by-election to be called in Edmonton Strathcona, right? So he couldn't get into the legislature. It's pretty tough for a leader of a party. Not even the official opposition leader had to win a seat before he could swear in as official opposition leader. Same as Pierre Poilievre, by the way. He's not technically leader of the official opposition right now. Should not have the keys to Stornoway right now, by the way. But Nenchi, basically now that he's got that seat, and these are the dog days of summer, and things will, resume, I think, in a very short time before we know it, and then we'll get to see him do what everybody's been waiting to see him do, and that is to thrust and parry in the legislature and to hold Danielle Smith to account. But you don't just, you don't exclusively need to be in the Alberta legislature to do that. I mean, you can do that on TikTok just as effectively.
If I'm operating out of my living room and you're operating out of your palatial studio that you as a business person have, arranged for yourself
without government funding.
No, I think that's wonderful. But the point is, if you had to do exactly what you're doing right now from your own house, you could do it. The idea that Naheed Nenshi, in order to get exposure with Albertans, needs to be in the legislature in Edmonton is absolutely ridiculous. People don't give a hoot where you're speaking from. Obviously, this is 2025. This is the modern world. And I just think it's silly for Nenshi to take the position that, he'll let you know exactly how he feels about everything, and he'll start taking the gig really seriously once the doors of the Alberta legislature are thrown open to him.
Darren in our live chat powered by Park Power says the NDP needs to do a better job of getting headlines, but how the hell do you out crazy the UCP? Jamie says Nenshi will surprise people this fall, says a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes changes that have been happening. That's probably true, Jamie. As he puts his team in place, as Notley's team slowly leaves, says, and everything is timing. And that's correct. So we'll take those. White Dream says the NDP is doing town halls across the province. Also true. So is the UCP. I guess we'll wait and see. You and I will check in again and talk about that in the future. I wanted to circle back on the Air Canada thing, just to hand it over to the chat for a moment. Jillian says, for example, I'm so sick of female-dominated jobs being so underpaid. She says, I'm thoroughly sick of it. Says when our office assistant was on strike at school, they needed to pay district accountants to do her job. Wobbly Inc. says, I come from an Air Canada family. 6 family members have worked for Air Canada. Wobbly Inc. says the company is no longer good to their employees. Interesting. And Cliff says, I agree that flight attendants should be better compensated, but they should have agreed to binding arbitration. Now the public's going to be pissed off that they're going to be missing their flights. And that's true. Like, you also have to, I know that a big part of, and I have been part of a strike before, at least impacted by a strike before. It cost me my first job with the Calgary Herald. I'm not sure if I've ever told you that, Chuck. Non-union position, entry-level job with the Calgary Herald, dream job at my hometown paper. But I was a non-union position, and I knew that crossing the picket line was about the dumbest thing that you could do at the beginning of your career or at any point in your career. So I had to resign. It actually breaks my heart to this day. So I recognize that a lot of times you have to dig in, and I respect people that have to take strike action, put their faith in their union bargaining team, and obviously try to get a better deal for their families, for their colleagues, and the like. You also have to look at what it does to the public trust, what it does to public opinion of your institutions, and I think that Canada Post employees are grappling with that right now. I'm not sure if you saw this op-ed, ran about a week ago. Les Viner, business analyst, a pretty well-known, economic commentator and the like, essentially writing in the Globe that Canada Post is a case study in Canadian dysfunctionality. We've had this conversation from a number of different angles, from different stakeholders, including the local Edmonton union rep, who I think actually did a marvelous job on this show, really humanizing their perspective. But I think that the average Canadian paying attention to this story understands that some big things have to change if Canada Post is going to continue to survive, or at least justify the amount that Canadians invest in it every single year. What are you thinking on Canada Post?
Well, I'm thinking that the government has to get out of the post office business. Just as I said earlier, it would be dramatically ridiculous for us to have the government owning the only supermarket in Canada, having all of the supermarkets owned by the government. That would be ridiculous. It'd be just as ridiculous to have all the liquor stores owned by the government, whether it's the Alberta government or Canadian government. And I think the idea that we can't deliver stuff without Canada Post is ridiculous. You see all those Amazon trucks, you see all those UPS trucks, you see all the Purelators, you see all the others. We know how to deliver mail. We know how to deliver parcels. We know how to deliver checks without the government. And I want to repeat once again, technology is what it is. Most of what we need to have delivered and needed to have delivered in terms of important messaging, including checks, most of it is being taken care of electronically. It's time to live in the modern world. I don't think that we need a national post office. And if someone says, but Chuck, we've always had a national post office. Well, just, flip this podcast back about 20 minutes. The argument that we need to do something because we've always done it this way is lazy-minded.
Yeah, I feel like, there's kind of that idea around the essential service, and I think that, I don't try to pull too many things into our conversations, but you hear similar arguments when people are talking about funding or defunding the CBC. And a lot of times they'll talk, there's a lot of fat that could be trimmed, but at its core, its mandate needs to be serving Canadians from coast to coast to coast with equitable access to information, reputable fact-check journalism, representing the stories in small communities, government accountability, and the like. You can't always leave that up to private industry or for-profit business. Healthcare, you can make the same argument. Education, you can make the same argument. And I think that there are people in, rural communities, for example, where FedEx and UPS and everybody else, just doesn't see a real delivery model or doesn't make the bottom line case for investing in those communities with service, or at least with regular service. In those instances, I think you can make a compelling argument for the continued existence of Canada Post. But you look at through Purelator, and their parcel delivery services. I don't know. This was, I'm the grandchild of Rudy Dutka, a proud chemical engineer with Chevron for more than 40 years, and it always really grinded his gears when government was in the business of business. I think I was conditioned from a young age to believe that government should get the hell out of the way there.
Ryan, if you outsourced, the issues you're talking about, the towns and hamlets where, you don't see the FedEx or UPS truck very often. The fact is, if you outsourced it to private businesses, and they wouldn't necessarily be FedEx or UPS, but are you telling me honestly that you don't have Albertans who would be prepared to own businesses where the commitment is to make sure that the mail gets delivered to smaller towns and villages in Alberta? Are you telling me that the privates couldn't take care of that? Would we ever dare say that the only way that we can drill oil, drill for gas, and drill for other minerals in Alberta, that the only way we can do it is for the government to own the company that's doing the exploration and the drilling? We would never say that. So to me, the energy industry ought to be the model for all kinds of opportunities that we can do privately. And the more often I hear about the government finding private people and outsourcing to private people to do what the government used to do, the more free I feel as a Canadian.
Yeah, so I'm just, our family spent 5 days in just about 40 minutes east of Humboldt in Middle Lake, Saskatchewan last week. And it was kind of neat to see. We're talking real small towns. We were actually learning as a family, Charles, as we're driving, one of our favorite stops along the way. We never stop. I'm not going to lie to you. We passed through it, but we love the road sign. Delmas, Saskatchewan. I'm not sure if you were aware of Delmas. This is shout out to the Delmases that live there, but we're wondering, what's the population of Delmas, Saskatchewan? It's 126, if you were wondering. And then we wondered, well, what's the population of Middle Lake? Well, it's under 200, if you were wondering. And we meet this fella. Lucien Lake is this beautiful spot. It's just out. It's about maybe 15 minutes east of Humboldt. Great family spot, but still very affordable lake lots. By the way, I was blown away. You can get into a lake lot. I'm not even going to say because I don't want it to be flooded with new investment from Alberta. But there's a fellow there. I start talking to him. He's running a little ice cream shop and kind of a confectionery. Fabulous poutine. You got to always check out the poutines and hockey rinks and beaches if they're dropped. Made to order, Chuck. That is my advice to any summer traveler. But I start chatting with this guy. He's a new Canadian, and obviously unafraid of hard work, unafraid of opportunity to create his own destiny. He was talking to me about how he's been working very hard to be able to bring his family over to Canada. He's by himself right now. He's got 2 young kids. His wife, he says, his eyes light up as he talks about them. Says we should have him here soon. On the weekends, he's making poutine and scooping ice cream at Lucien Lake, and during the week, he is running as an entrepreneur the post office in Middle Lake, and everybody knows his name. He's providing that essential service. It is doable. Again, I'm someone who'll find flaws in my comparison or flaws in my story, but I think it was a really neat experience to chat with that guy and pick his brain a little bit. Anybody that spends any time in rural Canada has seen these contract workers. And I don't know exactly what the business arrangement looks like, but you don't have the big Canada Post cube vans everywhere. A lot of times it's like a Hyundai Elantra with a little signal beacon on the roof and somebody stuffing those super mailboxes. It's already happening to a certain degree.
Look, I mean, whether we're talking about the situation that you're referring to, where the fella is being obviously given government money to do delivering of mail, okay, or running the post office. I mean, it's the same with doctors. You know, you grew up in a family with a wonderful doctor. I mean, would Bruce Jespersen ever say that the only way he can have a medical practice is if the government owns the building that he's in, and if the government hires the people that he needs to assist him in his office? He's a business person. Yes, of course, he's a physician. He's a great physician, and we have hundreds of thousands of great physicians. But the idea that all of them need the government to provide the facilities that they work in is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. And every time anyone talks about privatizing aspects of healthcare, people jump up and down and say that that'll deprive people of healthcare. It'll give us the American system, the nightmarish system, et cetera, et cetera. It's nonsense. I mean, you know, it's time, and I realize this is not for me to say. Maybe it's for a prime minister to say or a premier to say, but it's really time for Albertans and other Canadians to believe in themselves more, and to stop thinking that if the government doesn't own and operate every aspect of a particular industry, no matter how sacred it is, education, health, the post office, you name it, unless the government does exactly what they've been doing for the last 150 years, Canada will fall apart. No, Canada will not fall apart. The number one resource in Canada is not oil and it's not canola. It's us. We have to begin to believe in us, because we are the future.
Marie in our live chat says, we got to get back to home delivery. She says, Costco will deliver right to my farm. None of the other delivery services will. Lightning Rod says, Amazon ain't going to the fringe, Chuck. Neither is UPS. Michael says, give it a rest, Senator. Canada Post needs to modernize, not privatize. Pat says, Canada Post is an essential service for folks in the countryside, for elders, people with disabilities. Please keep that in mind. And Gilles says, I'm hearing an incredibly urban view right now. He says it'll definitely be rural communities that'll hurt if you drop Canada Post. I think that's a guarantee. I mean, that's 100% true. Chuck, I want to talk to you about, we haven't even got to the Polyev, I shouldn't be calling it that. The Battle River Crowfoot by-election. That's coming up on Monday. We're talking to you on a Wednesday, so it's in less than a week. I want to get your take on that. What's at stake? For a lot of people, they feel like the writing's on the wall, but I'm curious to know where your head's at. Plus, there is an issue that you continue to use your platform to passionately advocate against. And I want to talk about live horse exports to Asia as well. We're talking to Senator Charles Adler in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. These episodes, Chuck talks about this as a business, talks about our amazing sponsors. The number one way you can support this show is to show some love to our sponsors. And if you are looking for a custom closet or a storage solution, doesn't matter where. It could be in your garage, could be in your laundry room, could be your primary bedroom, that walk-in closet you've always dreamed of, maybe a Murphy bed to turn your home office into a guest room in 10 seconds. California Closets does it better than anybody, and you can invest in the confidence that comes with the lifetime guarantee. This is a Canadian-owned and operated company that manufactures all of their installations in our home province of Alberta using locally sourced materials whenever possible. It all starts with a free consultation. I've been through the process. Our designer's name was Reese. He's brilliant. Came up with solutions that, number one, fit our heritage home. It's more than 100 years old. And number two, that we could afford, right? We're not millionaires. You can learn more how California Closets can fit your space and budget by requesting that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Hey, speaking of saving money, how about those Kubi customers that had their solar panels installed last summer, the summer before, or maybe early this spring? It's never been more doable to go green between that Canada Greener Homes loan, plus programs like the Clean Energy Improvement Program. You don't have to shell out the full cost up front. I know for a lot of people that's a barrier. To get started, you can turn your roof or any extra space into something that'll actually save you money long term, and the team at Kubi is there to walk you through every step of the way. Why not cut your energy bills? Why not make a move toward a cleaner, brighter future? You can check out Kubi.ca, that's Kuby.ca, to get a free quote, or give them a shout, 780-340-5829. John, I'm happy to report I enjoyed leftovers last night. I told you that we picked up 6 thick, custom sliced Alberta T-bones from the butchers at Friesen Brothers the other day to entertain the family. I had a full T-bone left over. What's a guy supposed to do with a strip loin, a tenderloin?
Give it to the dog.
I'm going to give the dog the bone. Be careful giving your dogs bones, everybody. By the way, make sure you do it with constant supervision. But I'll tell you, reheated that with a slow brew as best I could, just a slow bake in the oven last night. Unbelievable. The flavor in this grass-fed Alberta beef knocked my socks off for the second night in a row. You can visit your local Friesen Brothers, talk directly to their butchers, and get the custom cuts you're looking for in 16 different Alberta communities. Your next chance to save 15% off your grocery purchases coming up on the 1st of September. Make sure you circle your calendars. And for those of you that are feeling inspired by back to school, but maybe don't live anywhere near a university, or maybe you're part of that sandwich generation looking after your parents and your kids at the same time, Athabasca University could be a perfect fit. Canada's Open University offers world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education whenever and wherever it works for you. You can check out their hundreds of programs and course offerings by visiting their website, athabascau.ca. Learn more about the AU Advantage at Athabasca University. August 18th. Canadians, Albertans in the Battle River Crowfoot riding will go to the polls as their MP, Damien Carrick, stepped aside to pave the way for his party's leader, Pierre Poilievre, to get back into the House of Commons. It's a field of more than 200 candidates. Due to the shenanigans of the longest ballot committee, the betting money is on Pierre Poilievre, but it is not a done deal. One of our most listened to interviews of all time, as a matter of fact, with candidate independent Bonnie Critchley. A lot of eyes on this by-election. Chuck, where's your head at?
I don't like Bonnie Critchley. I love her.
Okay, I was wondering where that was going.
She is marvelous. No, I don't know enough about her. I'm sure people say, well, how much do you know? I know what I saw on Ryan Jespersen's show.
Hell yeah.
Look, you have one of the best BS detectors in the country. And if Bonnie Critchley was full of it, you would have discovered it. I thought she was, well, what did you think? I just host to host. I mean, was she not one of the most outstanding guests, one of the most real guests that you've ever had on Real Talk?
Yeah, because she's not like, and everything I'm about to say is like a compliment, but she's unpolished. She's like, when you talk about grassroots, when you talk about salt of the earth, when you talk about the type of people that recognize the importance and value of public service and step up. I mean, she served her country. She's a military veteran. She's a rancher. She's running a compelling campaign. I know that a lot of people could absolutely rightly and fairly accuse me of favoritism here because we've not extended invitations to 210 different candidates in that riding. But Bonnie was on our radar because of Real Talkers, because of this engaged audience. I'm going to say I had 12 to 15 emails from people that were saying, please get her on the show. She's a compelling candidate. She's in it for the right reasons. And Johnny and I both noticed we don't say this stuff to the guests when they're here because it would make it awkward. But she was here, by the way, super early with a campaign team, all of them volunteers. They set up shop in our studio while she did the interview, and they're working their social media and they're setting up. I mean, they were taking it deadly seriously, which for an independent candidate you don't always see. I think that she'll make a real impact in the general awareness of that riding and maybe some of its issues. But I mean, let's be honest. If Pierre doesn't win this with 85+% of the vote, like Max Fawcett said famously a few weeks ago on this show, he's a loser.
Well, I'll tell you this. When you ask anybody the question, anybody in that riding the question, who would most accurately represent the interests of the people in that riding? Who mirrors that riding better than anybody else on that incredibly long War and Peace-like ballot? And I think the honest answer would have to be Critchley. So yes, we have national elections, we have by-elections for national office, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is we have more than 300 individual elections. We have ridings, we have them for a reason. People in the ridings want representation. Nobody on earth believes that if Pierre Poilievre wins, and he's the likely winner, of course, he's the front runner in that election. Anybody who's called conservative, I mean, if a toaster were running for the Conservatives that riding, I'd say that the toaster is the front runner. So Pierre Poilievre is the toaster. He's the front runner. He will likely win. But nobody on earth can look you in the eye or me in the eye, anyone who's watching or listening to this podcast, and say that when Pierre Poilievre is back in the House of Commons, what he's thinking about 24/7 is the riding in Alberta that elects him. That's not what he's thinking about. He's thinking about a thousand other things. And if Bonnie Critchley were to pull off a miracle, an August miracle, you have no doubt, regardless of how you may feel about certain aspects of her politics, you have no doubt that she is thinking about that riding at 9 o'clock in the morning and at 9 o'clock at night and at 4 o'clock in the morning, 24/7. So if someone is looking for someone who really is thinking about her riding first, not all kinds of other issues, many of which don't relate to the people in the riding, I think that's Bonnie Critchley. So if someone wants to accuse me of favoritism, fine. I've made a good living. The Canadian people have given me a very comfortable life by always saying what's on my mind and always speaking from the heart. And there it is. My heart belongs to Bonnie Critchley.
She's going to put that on a billboard, you know. Erica says, way to go, Bonnie. She says she's got Pierre so scared he recently adopted her right to repair idea. This is actually a big one. Farmers, rural communities, right to repair. People have told us, they're like, you guys should do an entire episode on right to repair. There's a guy, Chuck, that has an entire YouTube channel on right to repair. He's got like hundreds of thousands of views. Anyway, says he's out campaigning on it. Pierre's like running into a lot of Bonnie supporters, and he's trying to flip them back. Voters, constituents, Canadians, human beings have relatively short memories. And a year from now, unless somebody throws the grenade at him in the House of Commons and, make some joke or some quip about having to campaign twice, about losing the election and having to go, someone will throw that in Pierre's face at some point for sure. But generally speaking, a year from now, nobody's going to remember that he had to wait on the sidelines till he tapped in. Where would you suspect that let's say if Pierre Poilievre gets back into the House of Commons, where's his first angle of attack on Mark Carney? Is it still, is affordability still going to resonate with Canadians? Is it the housing crunch? Is it going to be the USMCA? And if it is, or Kuzma, do Canadians believe, can Pierre Poilievre convince Canadians that he's better qualified than the banker to cut a deal with Donald Trump? Where do you think he goes first?
Well, his number one job will be as a critic, and that's really the job that he loves the most. I know he aspires to being a prime minister, but for the next little while, he's going to have to specialize in what he is a specialist in, and that's criticizing. And Pierre Poilievre will find his way of saying, where's the deal? Because the number one reason that Mark Carney won and won large is because people had confidence, the Canadian people had confidence that Mark Carney could cut not just a deal, but a good deal for Canada. So my guess is that Pierre Poilievre, in his own words, will ask the question every single day, where's the deal?
Chuck, before we thank you for your time, and we're always grateful when you're able to join us. Obviously, we miss you on Mondays, but it's wonderful to be able to connect with you over the summer. I know that a year-round issue on your mind, and I saw you tweeting about it just the other day, is the continued live export of horses to Asian markets. For audience members that haven't heard you talk about this before, maybe you can explain very quickly why this issue resonates most strongly with you and exactly what you'd like to see done about it.
Because horses are my favorite animals, and I'm not willing to disparage dogs, cats, mountain goats, but I love horses. I think most Canadians love horses. We've got a special relationship with the horse. I certainly don't have to tell Albertans that we have special relationships with horses. And I'm sorry, if we love our horses, we cannot, and I will try not to get overly emotional about this because it is a very, very emotional issue with me. I cannot stand the idea of horses being loaded onto planes as cargo and traveling for 16, 17, 18 hours in stalls where anyone who understands what a horse is made of is torture. I'm not telling people what to eat. I'm not telling people which animals they ought to try to protect. But for goodness sakes, there is no reason on earth, and there's no economic reason on earth that Canadians have to participate. And by simply being Canadians, we're participating in this, whether we like it or not. There is no reason for Canadians to participate in the extensive and atrocious torture of hundreds and hundreds of innocent animals called horses. And I'm going to use a word that some people will object to, but I have to use it because one of my heroes in this country is Jan Arden, who lives in southern Alberta, and she's been more dedicated to this issue than anyone I can think of. Jan Arden says that this policy is, here comes the word, horse shit. And I agree with Jan Arden 100%.
People can check out, this is amazing, horseshit.ca, the website where you can stand with Jan Arden and Senator Charles Adler and put an end to live export of horses from Canada to foreign countries to be slaughtered for human consumption. Again, that's horseshit.ca. We love you, Chuck. We respect your service to your country as a senator. We miss you here on Real Talk, and we're grateful for every time you're able to join us. Have a wonderful rest of your summer, and we hope to talk to you this fall.
Ryan, I still think of you every single Monday, and every time that you text me or phone and ask me to be on the show, it is truly a privilege. I'm proud of you as a broadcaster and a podcaster, but I'm most proud of you as a fellow Canadian. And I tell you this, if the kids of this country, if every kid in this country had a dad like Ryan Jespersen,
wow.
this country would be so much better and so much happier. Thank you for what you do as a podcaster. Thank you what you do as a person who initiates important dialogues. Most of all, though, thank you for being a tremendous husband and a tremendous dad to your kids.
Kind of you to say, pal. That means a lot to me. We'll talk to you again soon. That is Senator Charles Adler joining us in the off season, so to speak, of the Senate. Of course, all the politics will fire up in meaningful fashion. I know it kind of feels, as a matter of fact, like this summer, nothing's really slowed down, right? You've got your Forever Canadian petition happening. We had former Premier Ed Stelmach on the show a couple of days ago with Thomas Lukaszuk, former Deputy Premier, an organizer of that petition. So you got that going on. Then you got the UCP with their their polling going on, trying to get a sense of what Albertans' priorities are at as that list of 9 demands lingers from Daniel Smith to the Prime Minister. You had the G7 summit in Kananaskis. You've got everything going on with the United States and of course, involvement in Russia and Ukraine, everything that's happening with Israel and Gaza. And I just it doesn't really feel like there's been an off season at all. But to think that the politicians are going to be getting back at it in both provincial and federal contexts, we got a lot going on. I will let this audience know that the morning after that Battle River Crowfoot by-election, so that'll be the 19th of August, that's next Tuesday, Corey can't join us, Corey Hogan, because he's now, of course, a member of Parliament out of Calgary and a parliamentary secretary. So he has stepped away from his role with the strategists. But the remaining 2, Zane Velge and Stephen Carter, will join us on the 19th of August on the Tuesday morning to give us their take on exactly how that by-election played out. Everybody's going to be paying attention to the numbers on that one, right? Could it be a miracle on the prairies? I guess we'll wait and see. But even if Pierre Poilievre pulls this one off, everybody's going to be studying the numbers to see if he could meet or exceed what Damien Currick was able to do, the Conservative MP before him that stepped aside. A ton of feedback from people on this, the Air Canada thing. Like, it's obvious that when an entire airline is basically shut down, whether it's for a day or a week or longer, typically these things don't take forever. And I would imagine it's a bit of a boon for the other airlines. I saw somebody in our chat say, thank God we flew Porter the other day, or thank God we have tickets on Porter. It's probably pretty good for WestJet if this happens. Not good for travelers, obviously, but a lot of people have been sharing their firsthand stories of chatting with flight attendants, with getting, sort of seeking to understand their position. And I think that it kind of acts as a good, it counteracts what I was saying earlier is, when you got to be careful when you take that strike action. of losing the support of the public. It's probably not the number one concern on your list. But at the same time, a lot of people kind of clapped right back. And I take your point. A lot of people were saying, I don't know, like I can kind of try to walk a mile in their shoes and recognize that this is something they're going to dig their heels on. It's important to them. Aaron says, chatting with a flight attendant on a recent long flight, I asked how they cope with it, like just the long hauls. She says, given as a passenger, it even seemed unbearable for me. And she says that the flight attendant said back to her, I've been doing this for 20 years. I am just permanently jet lagged. Can't imagine. Also saw somebody else saying, and I don't know if this is true or not. If it is, it's remarkable, says that flight attendants don't start getting paid until the cabin door closes and the flight starts taxiing on the runway. Is that true? So they said, like, basically onboarding the passengers, doing the announcements, everything else is unpaid work. Is that actually true?
I have no idea.
I don't know if that's true. Do we have a flight attendant that's listening or watching right now that can send us an email? That would blow my mind. That might be something that might motivate me to get a better deal. If that's what I was doing. And then, of course, we have a ton of comments here on public versus private. Some of you, calling out Adler, saying, do we really have a Canadian senator here advocating for private health care? Hey, this show, I have my own positions on healthcare delivery, and, I've shared them before. If you ever just want to Google Ryan Jespersen, Life's Not Fair, you can see how not everybody loves my opinions on healthcare, but I also note that there are massive barriers to service for a lot of people. We have physician shortages. We got a lot of issues that need to be addressed, but a lot of people also clapping back on the idea that Canada Post could be replaced. It's one of those institutions where I think a lot of people connect with it like on an emotional level. Do you know what I mean? Like when the letter carrier arrives at your house, or you think back of, like, we've had people talking about childhood memories of going into the post office either to pick up their mail or to send those packages. I guess the question is, bottom line, when you have a government, Todd Hirsch, the economist, was on maybe about a month ago with a really excellent take on where Mark Carney's going to find this extra $50 to $60 billion a year that Canada's going to need, that the feds are going to need to get Canada up to the military spending commitment that the President of the United States is expecting. And if you're starting to talk about finding $50 billion in a federal budget, things like Canada Post and the billions of dollars that are invested there, I think are quite rightfully going to be examined under closer scrutiny. And maybe for a lot of people, that's going to mean some tough decisions. Black Sheep says yes to private healthcare alongside public healthcare. I can't afford private, but maybe somebody that can will take the pressure off the public system instead of going to the United States or the other countries where they'll offer those types of services. I've seen some of you sharing your stories firsthand of waiting months or even years for surgeries that you've needed. I totally understand that for a lot of people, healthcare is that kind of, they talk about in politics like that third rail, right? In Alberta, they say that talk around a sales tax is like the third rail of politics, the railroad reference, right? You step on the third rail, immediately electrocuted, you're done. Political suicide to start talking about things like a sales tax. For a lot of people in a lot of jurisdictions, exploring ideas around alternative delivery models in healthcare is politically very unpopular. But if it's ever going to happen, Alberta is one of those provinces where, the government's already paving the way for it. We're seeing private surgical centers. We're seeing this happen. And a lot of Canadians are traveling internationally, that medical tourism, they call it, to go get surgeries done. So I'll be curious to see what that looks like 5 years from now. If it blows up in the government's face, which it very well could be a gift to Naheed Nenshi. I'm curious to see what he's going to do as his first order of business this fall. I saw somebody make a note in there that Naheed Nenshi went to university with Danielle Smith. And so they wonder if there's some personal insights there that could fuel some of the sparring that will happen, the verbal sparring.
I remember you keg stand better than I did at that one party.
Yeah. I wonder if it's
I've never lived it down.
I've never asked either of them about that. I don't think I have heard that they were both at the University of Calgary around the same time, but
in debate club.
Well, were they?
I don't know.
Were they like in the same classes?
No idea.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Two university classmates, wired differently politically, obviously, to rise to the two most prominent provincial political positions in Alberta years later. That'll be kind of a neat story for sure. Stephen is watching us live. What's up, Steve? Says a status quo in our healthcare is not the answer. He says, I'm not sure why that's controversial. It shouldn't be. Ivana's watching us, says Poland has both private and public healthcare, and it works great. And I know we're going to get a bunch of emails from folks that are going to obviously have strong arguments for maintaining a publicly funded and publicly administered system. A reminder, you can always submit for the flamethrower. This is our favorite weekly tradition. We wrap up every week here on Real Talk, courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, by handing you the mic. These are the hottest takes. The fieriest emails and YouTube comments. You can send it into talk@ryanjespersen.com. That's coming up obviously on Friday of this week, where we'll be joined by Max Fawcett. You can send us your emails to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Make sure you put flamethrower in the subject line. Wanted to make sure that all of you are well aware of what they're doing at UCAN Youth Services right now. We're really committed, if it hasn't been made obvious already, to use this platform and to put UCAN in front of our audience. 2025 into 2026 is a massive year for this nonprofit charitable organization. They're dedicated to helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. I'm not asking you to support an organization that I don't believe in, and I'm not asking you to support an organization that we are not proud to support. And there's a bottom line argument for this as well. This isn't all just emotion. This isn't all just theory. You can learn more about UCAN's approach on their website at ucan.ca. Their staff on a daily basis are dealing with youth homelessness, transient lifestyle, school issues, unemployment, court supports, addictions, gang involvement, mental health. They're always building strong relationships with young people while advocating for ways to successfully remove them from those high-risk lifestyles. And guess what? It works. It works. The investments that are being made in UCAN are translating into fewer incarcerations, into more housed young people with food security, into more people joining the workforce and making positive contributions, not just to society, but in their own lives. It's the ready, willing, and able model. Again, you can find it online at ucan.ca. And we also want to remind you that our friends at North Road Investment Council are taking this summer to consult with their clients and potential clients that have built successful businesses. You've built strong careers, but you want to make sure that your wealth is being organized in a way that will deliver a successful retirement. What's your next phase looking like? What's your plan? North Road does a lot of work with clients that come from analytical, detail-driven professions, engineers, architects, dentists. The typical client has more than $2 million in investable assets and is looking for a steady hand and a studied voice. If that sounds like you, the team at North Road is interested and wide open to a conversation. You can visit their website today, northroadic.com, and start a conversation with Marshall, Carey, and their team built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. That's North Road Investment Council at northroadic.com. Connie says private clinics are super expensive and only the rich can afford them. Connie, you're right. They are expensive. I mean, I guess it's all relative, but you look at people that are desperate to have an MRI as an example, and they're going to be, told they got to wait like 8 to 16 months approximately, or they can pay like $1,500 or $2,000. For a lot of people, that's a tough pill to swallow, obviously. For some people, it's not an option. For other people, the only option is to pay whatever it takes and go get it because they're in such incredible pain. And then you have the folks that are traveling, there's surgical centers in Toronto. It happens a lot. I know that there's a lot of people traveling to Mexico. A family member of ours didn't work out for her, by the way, blew up in her face. And there's a lot of challenges when a lot of these folks return back. We heard from an orthopedic surgeon, a regular listener of the show who asked not to be named. We'll respect that, of course. But he told us, Johnny, that a real issue with a lot of Canadians that leave, they'll get their knees replaced, they'll get their hips replaced in other countries, including Mexico. They come back, they'll encounter complications after the surgery, and then they'll re-enter the public system to deal with those complications, but now you don't have a consult with the surgeon who did the surgery. Yeah. Right? And so, he says that that's also, their kind of idea of counteracting that argument that when someone who goes to a private clinic steps out of the public queue, it actually moves those utilizing the public system closer to the surgery. This orthopedic surgeon says, well, that's not always the case. He says, because sometimes these surgeries get screwed up, and then you got a whole mess on your hands. So listen, I'm wide open. I appreciate Stephen's comments where he says, the status quo isn't working, so sticking with that is bonkers. That's my paraphrase. I do believe that when systems are broken, including healthcare, including Canada Post, that we have to be willing to go into uncomfortable areas to examine alternatives. But I also recognize that when you talk to Canadians or you talk to global citizens in their perspective of Canada, healthcare is oftentimes literally number one on the list of what they're most proud of.
Yeah, I mean, one of those surgeries, I was just reading, somebody commented in here. I mean, even going down to the States and doing it, I mean, a major surgery can bankrupt you. It can bankrupt a family. So I think healthcare is always top of mind for Canadians. And it is generally, for the most part, I think most people across the world think favorably of healthcare in Canada. But it can always be better, right? I think of right now, like now I need, I know you've got one. I went and saw one, finally got a healthcare physician, and it didn't work out. I think they switched. They went to another part of town. Now I'm looking for another one, and I've got like a little ear problem. This is probably getting a little too personal, but I think it's like there's a bit of water trapped in one of my eardrums. Yeah. And it's been persistent for a few weeks to where like, I need to go to an audiologist. Like I need to go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, but I don't have.
You need a referral.
Of course. And I've hit up like 4 or 5 different ear, nose, and throat doctors, and they will not respond to you unless you have a referral. So my last avenue is to go to maybe this Sunday, go to Emerge, sit in Emerge, get in to see a doctor just to say, hey, this isn't life-threatening, but this is happening to my ear, refer me. But also, it's like, I don't want to do that. There's other people who need to get ahead of people in an emergency line. So there's these small problems that are happening right now within Canadian healthcare and provincial healthcare where like and I know that's probably something that is maybe specific to Alberta because we have longer wait times here now, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like Canadians are waiting across the country for everything.
Every single thing, and that's why I feel bad even going.
Well, and the family doc story is an issue across the country, and that's like that's not just a retention issue. That's also a recruitment issue. And then you look at like just even bigger picture. You're going to be hearing more. I won't get ahead of myself too much, but you'll be hearing more from Alberta's nurses in the months to come on this show. And I will say that, one of the things I think that concerns healthcare professionals, for obvious reasons right now, is that next crop. That the young talent, right? These young people, when did you start thinking about your career? Maybe for some people, it's probably 6 years old. You always wanted to be a pilot or whatever it is. 4
years ago.
Yeah, but I'm going to start thinking about mine 5 years from now. But for a lot of people, you get into that age, like 14, 15, you start making plans. Some of us at 16, 17, 18, you got to kind of decide, like to a certain degree, like, are you going to travel for a year? You can enter the workforce, which is totally fine. You're going to go to university, like whatever you're going to do. And we need some of our best and brightest in healthcare. We need the people. You should see these 51 Real Talk Julie Rohr scholarship applications. How many of them are young people that are pursuing careers in healthcare in many circumstances against all odds, and looking and reading some of the headlines and the stories around healthcare in Canada, you kind of wonder if some of these young people or if a large number of them will be dissuaded from pursuing a career in healthcare because they look at all the adversity that the existing healthcare workers are dealing with, right? Super Chat Ken wonders, is there anything more important than focusing on improving our healthcare? He says, why is our government focused on all the right-wing policy bullshit instead of healthcare reforms? That from Super Chat Ken. You can let us know what you think to talk at ryanjespersen.com on all of this. By the way, Wobbly Inc. says ears and hearing is very important, Johnny, especially because
you think I don't know?
Well, she says because your work depends on good hearing.
I'd be broke within a month.
Says you should go and not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
I guess you could probably. I mean, I know this is obvious. You could just go to like one of those drop-in centers and get a referral from there.
I was
just
thinking that,
like
or an urgent care or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's something where like I've had this happen before, where like it's like from the shower or something, cleaning your ears, and like a little bit of water gets trapped, but it's been trapped there for a while, and I know it's water because when I go like this, Ryan, it goes away. And when I go like this, it's back. So I think there's a small amount of liquid trapped in, I don't know, some part of my ear, the drum, the canal, whatever. I'm not ENT. But yeah, I just got some tips here. I just looked up an urgent care in East Edmonton, and it looks like it's pretty.
That's what everybody's saying.
Yeah,
Everybody's
so I'm going to go hit that
just
up.
go to
probably,
a walk-in clinic, you know. Cassandra, and listen, guys, like, you know, you may hear an opinion that you don't like on the show. That's totally fine. I would actually feel like a complete failure if you never felt challenged or you never heard anything you disagreed with on this show. This is a very diverse audience, which is something we're incredibly proud of. Cassandra, thank you for your YouTube membership, by the way. Cassandra says, yeah, but those people that can afford MRIs are putting people like me with severe conditions who are poor to the back of the line, and then that even puts my health at further risk. Jay says, absolutely, Jespo, public healthcare has to clean up the mess that private facilities create. Jay kind of echoing what we heard from that orthopedic surgeon, who, by the way, has an immense amount of credibility. I know him personally. JJ says, I don't think that privatizing healthcare is the answer. I do think that the Royal College has to find a way to make it easier for physicians and specialists that come here from other, you know, jurisdictions like Europe, for example. He says, to practice here, we need more doctors. A lot of rural communities are welcoming international doctors. I've heard, in particular, for whatever reason, I've heard there's a lot of doctors from South Africa that are coming to Alberta in particular. There must have been some recruitment campaign or something to make that happen. But again, that's kind of like a bit of a tough pitch. Listen, I was professing my love for rural Saskatchewan, and I mean it. Like, we had a vacation out there, a visit with family members, like within the last 2 weeks, and it was absolutely incredible. Drove me nuts that I had 1 bar of 3G service for like 5 days in a row, but I needed that as well. I needed to realize that I don't need to be on my phone all the time. I don't need to be responding to emails. I don't need to be like checking my Instagram notifications when I'm out on the farm watching the wheat blow in the breeze. Like, are you kidding me? Searching for the northern lights, watching these, you know, there's this lone snow goose that for whatever reason never left Lucian Lake with the rest of its crew. There's this one goose that just stayed there for whatever reason. It was suggested by someone smarter than me that it may have been molting at the time and unable to fly. So now they have a handwritten sign up that says, please do not feed the goose, not the geese. Do not feed the goose.
The
There's
one goose.
There. And guess what? I sat there and I watched this goose for like an hour, and I would never take time out of my day to do something like that before. So there is something to be said for like getting away from your phone. I have so much love and appreciation for the rural communities. The rural way of life is a whole different way of life. I'm not suggesting that all you're doing is sitting around and watching wildlife, by the way. People are busting their ass out there. But I will say, trying to draw, like when you talk about family physician shortages and rural healthcare challenges, it's a different pitch to somebody, an international doctor, when you're going to, try to pull somebody in from, Namibia or South Africa or like wherever you're pulling them from, Sweden, I don't know.
Shout out Namibia.
Yeah, why not? It's like one of the funnest countries to say. But when it's a different pitch when you're like, we can pay you like $600,000 a year and come live off Burrard Street in beautiful downtown Vancouver, versus like we can pay you like $225 and you're going to be living 90 minutes away from the closest supermarket, right? Like these are different pitches, and so I think that there are unique challenges. I'm stating again something very obvious that rural communities face here for sure. Blasheep wondering, what do I think could unite people from the left and the right to vote for a particular party? What an interesting comment. I don't know. Unite people from the left and the right to vote for one particular party. Well, it depends. If you're trying to draw lefties to vote for a conservative party, it's one thing. If you're trying to vote, convince right-wingers to vote for a progressive party, it's another.
I think in Canada it's pretty hard. I mean, we saw this in the last federal election,
yeah,
where we thought conservatives were going to come over to the liberal side if they want. The election was decided on who can handle Trump. Let's be honest, that was the number one thing. Who can handle Trump, tariffs, all the stuff looming in the States. And it seems like Carney won that. But then the conservatives got more votes than, Pierre got more votes than ever. So did people. That was a pretty important issue. And it didn't seem to move the needle on people jumping from one party to the other than the NDP going to the liberal side, right?
My friend Stephanie's watching us, just texted me on my phone directly. She says it's Zambia, not Zamibia, you
I was
idiot.
just going to say, I've never heard of that.
I think that I have to buy her a drink
Is that
now.
Zimbabwe?
No, Zambia. It's just not. She said, "Did you mean Namibia? Zambia?" Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that was
Listen,
a Namibia, Zambia.
you guys, like,
cross.
this is
Mashup.
true, and I've told you this many times. Like, I barely passed high school. This is not a joke. No, this is not a joke. Like, everyone goes, "Why did you go to the university? You went to Trinity Western University." Everyone goes, "Why did you go there?" Well, the number one reason, I had a wonderful experience there. It was great. There's a lot of, grab me a beer sometime and I'll tell you the whole story. But the number one reason is because I didn't get into the University of Calgary. That's why. That's the number one reason. Although geography, social studies was where I struggled the least. So that's saying something. It was math, chemistry. I could not handle science, man.
I'm about to cue the outro music because our credibility here is waning a bit.
No, it's
with
not.
This.
I want young people to hear this. Like, and I don't want it to act. Well, why don't you cue the music and I'll turn it into an inspirational.
okay.
I'll turn it into an inspirational extra here.
See what we did there?
I do not want this to serve to convince young people that you don't have to work hard or that you shouldn't pay attention in school or that there's no value in what you're learning in that classroom, because there is. But if you find that school's not the best fit for you, or your learning style is different, or you work really hard and you can't achieve the marks that you think you should be achieving, it doesn't mean that your future will be compromised. It's a big, wide world full of opportunity. Go find yours. We love you.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.